welcome back to the Cardboard Box Item podcast. I'm Sean. We have Michael in the studio with me here, and Stephen is dialing in from Japan. I don't know why that's funny, but anyway, say hi, Steve. Sorry. He can't even say hi. He's so starstruck at dialing in from me. Anyway, so today's podcast is going to be on violence in video games. More so the question, why are violent video games so popular?
They're just cool, man.
They are pretty cool, yeah.
End of podcast. Play doon, 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 or whatever we play at the end.
I'm sure listeners out there will have noticed as well that a lot of the most popular games of all time and year on year are full of violence to some degree. And this this can be like anything. The most obvious one is like the shooters and stuff. Your Call of Duties, your Dooms, all that kind of thing. But when you think about it, like, violence is used as a mechanic in almost every genre. There are like notable exceptions, like sports games, some racing, like traditional racing games, and like
puzzle games and
things like that. Yeah. But you know, in some degree, in like platformers and all that kind of stuff, there is violence. Even if it's pretty tame, it's still there as like a main mechanic.
I think it's worth mentioning though that we are not. We love violent video games. We're not anti-violent.
We're not
video
that
games.
like, what's that parent association in America who battled against
like Jack Johnson or somebody was named a lawyer who tried to get Grand Theft Auto Vice City banned and all this stuff. But I think it's worth mentioning the bastard. It's worth mentioning that I think the debate about do violent video games cause violence is almost over at this point.
That's not what this is about.
Yeah, we're just looking, because it's an interesting thing to look at, that it is dominated by shooters a lot of the time, but also other forms of violence in games, and just to like drill down into why that is.
Exactly, yeah. It's just something that I guess we've noticed. You know, it's been pretty obvious, but it's not something that people really talk about. And I think it's a good topic for discussion, really, to get to the heart of it, really. Even though, you know, we might not come away from this with like a clear answer. It's like, this is the reason. But
we definitely will not go away.
The three of us are not the people to ask.
If you've listened to the Evil Within podcast, which should be out by the time this is out.
It was pretty clear what the answer after that one was.
But so anyway, I guess to start off, we kind of just give like a brief history of violence in video games. So if we go like all the way back to when games began, and I already don't know the name of this game, but it was a spaceship game, like the very first. Have any of you seen is it Reykjavik's video on...
No, I think it's Ahoy.
No, sorry. It's Ahoy's video on... the first video game ever made. That's what it's called, yeah. And he narrows it down to this game made in, I think, the late 60s or early 60s. 60s anyway, I'm pretty sure. And it was basically kind of like a space shooter game on a really early computer monitor. Do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and it's sort of like it's like an oscillator screen or something like that.
Oh, I know that. I was going to say it's a bit like Asteroids, but no, it's a different one, isn't it? Like, no, I think I know the one, but I can't think of the name.
It has some generic name like Space something.
Yeah. But anyway, the
Space War.
Space War. There you go. Yeah. And I'm pretty sure like the main mechanic in it was you were this little spaceship and you were shooting like asteroids or.
Yeah, other dots,
basically. But the main mechanic in that was shooting. So that's how old that mechanic goes back to the very first video game.
Yeah.
And, you know, I guess you could, like, it wasn't like, you know, really like gory or anything, but technically you were killing an enemy.
It'd be funny if there was like
guns
outrage.
Were invented shortly after that.
Right? Yeah, exactly. So the first man was ever murdered after playing that game.
Is this the new running joke? Is it? Anyway,
we're allowed to make fun, Sean. This isn't personal.
Oh, it feels personal.
Hey,
to me,
I didn't even bring up the fact that you said Resident Evil 4 was the first survival horror game ever made.
It is. Anyway, we've just established that the first video game ever made had some kind of violence in it. And then as we move on to, I suppose, the arcade era and things like that, you had your shoot 'em ups, your beat 'em ups. Most games of that era as well had some kind of violence. If there's any notable examples you guys want to shout out, by the way, feel free.
Can I actually just want to check one thing? Like, you say the first video game ever made? I thought the first one was Tennis for Two.
I think it's somewhat debatable what the very first game ever made was. Like we're referencing a video by Ahoy where he tries to break it down, and there's lots of, depending on what metrics you have that constitutes a video game, it can go like really far back. One, let's say in the group of the first range of video games up to Pong, Space War is a very early one. So I think the point stands, Sean, that like you're right, the mechanic of shooting something and destroying something else has been central to video games since the very beginning. And then you've got the other strand, like Stephen pointed out, where they copy a sport. So that seems to be, for the beginning of games, that was the two lanes you were in. You were either simulating a sport in some way, which is Pong, or you're destroying an enemy.
Yeah.
And destroying an enemy then leads to, like you were saying, beat 'em up games and shooters. And then you've the evolution into, with like Wolfenstein, into first-person shooters and games like Ultima and eventually Doom. Then you have, with Doom, you have that explosion of popularity. And it just so happens that Doom is a very, very violent and graphic depiction of that sort of thing. Like, there's a bit of that in those older first-person shooters, but they're pretty tame compared to Doom.
Yeah.
Doom seemed a lot more gory, and it, like by today's standards, it wouldn't be much when we have things like modern Doom and Hatred and stuff like that. But at the time, it caused a bit of a outrage. I guess Mortal Kombat and things like that as well. We're seeing there was this panic about, like fucking, middle class white people always have to fucking like get really angry about all this shit. And that seems to happen around that time with Doom. So
yeah.
It led to even more popularity of violence in games, I guess.
Yeah, it's funny. It kind of like almost spurred a bit of competition to see who can, make a more violent video or gory video game. And it's funny, I just like thought of a comparison with like metal music back in the day when everyone wanted to be heavier than the other band and stuff, and just like kept going and going and going. But then
that was the satanic panic of like the early 90s.
Yeah.
They call that. Like there's that, and there's like just violent movies and stuff as well, like the likes of Commando and all that sort of thing. Like, so
and horror movies like the Video Nasties and stuff, where there did seem to be that competition to outgore each other and sort of do that, and all
this culminated perfectly in like Night Trap, which had like the violent gameplay, violent movies, and of course like a serious heavy metal song like as the theme song, Night Trap. That one. Do you get a clip of that play?
Yeah, we can definitely throw that in. There's no copyright in that. Who wants to copyright a Night Trap?
Man, yeah.
But back to the point, I guess, like we're talking about the mechanic of shooting something. The reason that's so popular is because it's so satisfying. Now, I don't mean satisfying in terms of I want to kill something, but there's such an instant feedback loop.
Exactly.
From I shoot something, an object leaves, like in earlier games, you would physically see your bullet or your missile move. It hits an enemy, so it requires skill. I need to aim properly, adjust for movement, etc. Then the enemy dies or explodes or whatever, and I realize that's the satisfaction of I've accomplished my goal.
Yeah.
It's probably in some ways as simple as that. Like you can't find a more succinct sort of gameplay loop and feedback loop, really. And I guess that's why as well sports were a common thread in early games and up to this day, is because they already had predefined rules and win states that were very easy for people to get because they already knew the sport. And it can be as simple as one number being higher than another.
Yeah. It's like you said, it's amazing how, I don't know like I suppose Wolfenstein 3D was the first person game, but like the first game to have like, actual guns in it as like your main tool or whatever that you use. And it was just like, I can imagine it just being a eureka moment. It's like, this is so simple. This is something we have in the real world, and it like works so well to give the player instant satisfaction and feedback. And yeah, it just took off from there pretty much.
And it's so versatile as well. There's so many different scenarios you can use shooting or destroying an enemy in. So you have like a first person shooter, you can have a top down shooter, side scrollers, you can have, if you want to just be defeating enemies, you have platformers where you jump on enemies. You've beat 'em ups as well.
I think we've just answered the question of the podcast.
Wrap it up, guys.
That's it. Lads, thanks so much. Yeah, but that's it. It's just like, it's endless from there. And then like when we come into, I know you were just talking about like Doom and stuff in the 90s, and then that like ultra violent and like arena combat game kind of became worn out after a while. So then we went to like military shooters, which were huge and still are huge, but especially in the early noughties, I suppose, with Call of Duty and like Battlefield and all those ones that came out around then. And they were all trying to be not realistic, but portray like real world combat and situations like that, you know.
I wonder if it'll ever reach a point where, because like we're talking about Doom's a bit more realistic than, you know, Wolfenstein, and then you get onto more realistic games, and then we reach military shooters where they're not necessarily gory, but they're quite brutal, as in like you're just headshotting guys and then moving on. There's no ceremony, there's no pausing to think about. You're just killing indiscriminately. Are we ever going to reach a point where killing is actually psychologically damaging in a video game, where it becomes so realistic and so immersive that it's very difficult to kill something in a game?
Well, this kind of goes into another question of why do we as players enjoy video game violence so much? And like, I don't think it will. I don't know, it's hard to say like when you're talking about how realistic it's going to get. But I think like there's a good, I suppose, you know, when we're talking about why we like it so much, there's a good comparison to be made with films and violent films, and they're always really popular. And why do we enjoy watching that? Is it because it's another reality that we can't see, or, you know, like war games, you know, we know wars have happened and still happen around the world, but we don't experience them. So it's nice to experience it from the comfort of your own home, you know, and you get to play as this soldier going around. It's like, oh, I died again, but not in real life. It's all okay, you know.
But the difference, I guess, is the interactive element. So we're going to have to pull the trigger in this case. And like, I'm not saying it's a problem at the moment at all. And like, we love games that involve killing enemies, like all of us do. Well, all of us speaking on this podcast, I mean. But it's just a thought that came to me. Is it ever going to reach a plateau where it's like too real?
I just wanted to bring up a game, because you were talking about like military shooters and stuff, and you know all that. Sniper Elite. In Sniper Elite, they have like an X-ray camera, so your main weapon is a sniper, and when you shoot someone, it'll like slow the bullet down and show it entering their body and like bursting their organs and stuff, and it's really brutal. Like I was playing it the other night, actually, Sniper Elite 4, and like you can shoot a guy's jaw off, and it'll show his skeleton and his jaw just like flying off. It's really brutal.
But that taps into that's a reward for the player.
Yeah,
that's not like any sort of message. Well, unless I'm completely missing the point. That's like, you did well, here's your reward. It's the slow-mo shot of the bullet going through the guy's heart, you know? And nothing wrong with that. There's definitely a space for that. It almost seems like an evolution of, you know, the Mortal Kombats or Splatterhouses or that sort of thing. It's scratching that same itch. But I'm just wondering, are we ever going to get to a point where we can't pull the trigger?
I think because
I don't think it ever will.
Yeah, I think because there's no consequences for us as the player. It's not like, you know, well, I mean, there's a few different ways of looking at it. I mean, if you could shoot someone in real life and kill them and have no consequences, would you do it? You know, morally, you probably wouldn't do it, because you're like, even though everyone's saying this is grand, you know, I don't want to take someone else's life, you know,
fair.
for moral ground reasons. But like, in a game, it's like, oh, that's irrelevant because that's not
I
a
love
real
that we've
character,
established
that's not a
that
real
Sean
person.
would not kill someone if he'd get away with it. I love
Well,
that. Like,
if,
that's
it
a baseline.
if it was him or me, then that'd be different.
Oh wow,
but-
your story's changing now. You'd be glad
Say
to kill.
say the evil within is a good game. Say it, man. Say it.
It's the first survival horror game. No, anyway. Yeah, but I think, yeah, like I was saying, in a game, there's no consequences, and that isn't even a real person. It's just, a bunch of numbers in a computer. So
The thing is, I think we're always going to be aware of that. There's never going to be a point in a game that like we've gotten so immersed that we genuinely believe that the person we're aiming our gun at is a real person. Because I mean, if that ever happened, amazing. But I think the closest we've ever gotten to that, for me personally, would actually be in something like The Walking Dead, because that's a game where we're really emotionally invested in the characters, and we find ourselves in situations where we have to kill someone for maybe the betterment of the group we're in, or to, stop them from having a much worse fate, like being eaten by a zombie. I think military shooters are different because we never really get to know. I mean, now, correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't played a huge amount of military shooters, but there aren't that many cases where the people we're shooting at are people that were more or like in any way invested in.
yeah,
They're just seen as targets a lot of the time, which is a problem with
And
the
when you
genre,
know-
potentially. Yeah.
When you know you're playing a video game, it makes it very, very easy to pull the right shoulder button.
Yeah.
Well, I think I wouldn't say it's a problem because, I mean, that's the same as, in a real war, you don't know your enemy really that well, but you know that they're trying to kill you. So,
Maybe problem's the wrong word. It's maybe symptomatic of and an accurate reflection of how you have to dehumanize your enemy when you're in that situation. Like, you can't be thinking, I just ended someone, I just killed a brother, father, mother to someone else.
yeah.
But like, it can gloss over some, more complicated issues, especially when they're like real life military scenarios or historical scenarios that they're dealing with. Like, Call of Duty can get a bit sci-fi and all, and that like removes it a little bit, I guess. But when you get into like 6 Days in Fallujah and stuff like that, and that sort of dehumanization and erasure of humanity, I guess, in your enemy can be a very, problematic thing.
Yeah, there's just something I wanted to touch on is about like when you're playing any of these games, like I don't know about you guys, but I usually try and, have some kind of more like good morals in the game. So like
No.
but like for example, if you came across an NPC that wasn't an enemy or something, but you were still able to kill them, do you know what I mean? If in the game world or whatever, I had no reason to kill them, then I probably wouldn't. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'll just go around them or whatever.
Actually, this raises... Do you mind if I just do a very, very slight tangent here? It'll only take 2 seconds.
Yeah.
Did you play Modern Warfare 2 by any chance?
I know what you're talking about. No Russian.
No
Yeah.
Russian.
That's a really good thing to bring up. Yeah.
So, like, I'm presuming all three of us have played Modern Warfare 2, right?
Yes, yeah.
As a matter of interest, out of the three of us, who shot people in that and who didn't?
I shot people.
I shot
I'll
people
put my
as
hand
well.
up and say
Oh,
that.
interesting. I did not. In that moment, I didn't shoot anybody. in
You're
that.
taking the
That's
fucking
interesting.
moral high ground, are you, Steve?
No,
That's
I'm not.
fucking.
No, I just think that's interesting. I'm also a better person than you guys.
Yeah.
But
And you're going to heaven.
No, but exactly, those numbers are going back to their little number families. No, that's interesting though, because like I remember thinking. I remember at the time thinking like, no, I'm going to try and be the better person here, because it's funny how before, Sean, you were saying that like if you were given the opportunity to like kill somebody like with no consequences whatsoever and so on and so forth, you wouldn't do it. But yeah,
Well, yeah,
no Russian.
Okay. Yeah, okay, but I think I think I did shoot into the air at first because you have to shoot, don't you? Or they're like suspicious of you.
No, you don't have to shoot.
You don't have to shoot at all.
You don't have. The thing is, they make you think you have to.
Right.
Yeah,
And I remember
which is fair.
That's good.
Yeah. I think there's the same outcome either way. I think I might have done the same as you, Sean. I think I might have shot into the air or deliberately missed or something. But I remember specifically trying not to hit people. And I remember thinking, oh, wow, they killed me now because I didn't shoot people. That's interesting. But then I found out, even if you shoot people... Yeah, it happens anyway. That's just an interesting thing to bring up.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating level.
It's
just
amazing.
Because, like,
it really is.
The way they play it out, like, I think it's genius in some ways. I'm not making a moral statement on whether you should include something like this in the game. I just think it's genius design wise, and like it taps into a weird psychological thing that. It's almost like if you had a game where you have to destroy, I don't know, a supermarket or something. It just paints a tantalizing picture where you get to live out something you could never do in real life. Because at the beginning of the level, the airport's like functioning normally. People are waiting in a queue. And then they say, go ahead, like wreak havoc. And it's completely different from the rest of the game because the rest of the game is you're in an active war zone pretty much.
Yeah, the thing is though, it's meant to be jarring. It's not meant to be like a fun thing in the game.
Of course,
you know, it's meant to be like,
maybe
Jesus
that's
Christ.
a flaw then because for some people it's like, yeah, let's shoot everyone. Let's shoot as many people as possible. That was really fun. I blew off some steam. Whereas maybe it doesn't have the sort of, I don't know, kickback and psychological sort of resonance that something like, I don't know, Spec Ops The Line, the white phosphorus thing, which is probably like, in terms of AAA games, the closest analogy to that level.
Yeah, definitely. And in that, like you said, you're shown the results of the horrible thing you did. Whereas in No Russian, if you go shooting everyone, well, they just drop to the floor and then you moves on to the next level.
But the distinction is, in Spec Ops, you have to do it to proceed.
Yeah, that's
in
true.
Russian, you don't. So neither are perfect, I guess.
Yeah.
I was reading an article before, and this was actually on violent video games, like why people are attracted to it. And interestingly, whereas before they had this like weird idea that adolescents really like the idea of just like general aggression in games, they found what was more likely was that people were attracted to the idea of just vanquishing evil, good versus evil, rather than actual violence. And I think most of the games that we would talk about that have video games, there are glaring exceptions, hatred being the big one, where you are just like going in. And the reason like you're doing these violent things is because you're trying to eradicate evil within the context of the games you're playing. Call of Duty is a really interesting one because it presents like sort of fantasy version, like kind of magical realism version of the real world. And I say magical realism because like the politics of the games means that no matter what you're doing, you're always right.
Yeah.
You know, your character is always fighting for the greater good, always. And there's like, they make it in such a way, with the exception of No Russian, the one time I feel, well, I haven't played all of them, I don't know. But generally speaking, they do kind of make it in such a way that you don't really have to think about your actions. Whatever you're doing, you know it's the right thing to do in those games.
Yeah. Another game I actually was just thinking about while you were talking there, Steve, was Hotline Miami, which is like another ultra-violent game. And it's like it's weird because you're not really the good guy in it. You're like, you're killing bad guys, but you're doing it for other bad guys. So it's a weird thing. I guess that could be like akin to something like Mafia, where you're part of a mafia family and you fight other mafia families and stuff.
But I guess like the potential flaw with Hotline Miami is like, I love the game to death. It's probably one of my favorite games, but it maybe tries to have its cake and eat it. Because like you said, you definitely don't feel like the good guy in that game. Even if it didn't have those weird hallucinogenic sequences where it tells you like, do you feel good? Do you enjoy killing? I think the whole tone of the game would be like, I'm not saving people here. Like,
I mean, actually, now, just on that note, I think a very key part of that game, what I think like saves that game and makes it rise above the likes of hatred, there's a scene in the first game at least where you save a girl.
True.
And I think that is a really important part of that game, because the fact that you save someone gives you this like idea that even if it's not black or white, you're kind of on the side of good. There is like some sort of moral compass there, just because you decided to save one person. Like, you don't have the option to kill that girl. That's something, I think.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, the guys you're killing are bad and need to be taken out. So, it does feel like right that you're taking them down and stuff. But you're also going against the law, I guess. Like, I know I think it's the second game, there's a mission where you're just killing police officers. Actually, no, it's in both games. I'm pretty sure in the first game you go to a police station and you just kill all the police officers. And then in the second game, there is a level...
I think they contextualize that as in you have to kill some corrupt police officer or something like that. But saying that, like... we can't. I think we're sort of reaching here to a certain extent and trying to justify it, but maybe
great game though.
Fantastic game.
It is. It's a great game.
That soundtrack, man. Like, I'd kill people for that soundtrack. I'll tell you that.
But yeah,
we're going to be on so many lists after this podcast, lads.
One other thing I wanted to just bring up when we're talking about, especially with guns, I guess, but this can apply to like beat 'em ups and stuff as well, is how the violence is like oversaturated and glorified. And one like buzzword I'd like to use is hyperrealism, especially when it comes to sound effects. Because I know, for example, with Call of Duty and Battlefield and the likes, modern military shooters, the gun sound effects, like even down to the reloading and stuff, they sound like completely different than if you had that gun in your hand and shot it and reloaded it. It sounds way over the top in the game because they layer so many satisfying sound effects together to make the shot, to make the bolt clicking back, all that stuff. And I guess like that's another thing that these games have in common with like violence in movies, because the same thing happens in movies as well. To just give that, to just another layer of satisfaction to the player, and like that's why I suppose in games where you like unlock weapons and like do all that stuff, that's why it becomes like oh yes, I got like that gun, or I got my favorite gun.
It's your primary reward in lots of those games.
And it's another reason people have like maybe a favorite weapon. It mightn't even be because of the stats. It might just be because how it like looks and feels and sounds.
It's a really important part of the gameplay loop in those games.
Definitely.
I remember, this is a weird example, but I remember Matthew Matosis, who's a YouTuber, has this video on Devil May Cry, and he talks for like 15 minutes on the guns in that game, the pistols, about how there's like a muzzle flash and like a little bullet comes out of it each time, and then you have like a little like area on the enemy that it hits, and the sound effect and the lighting effect from the gun. Like mechanically the gun could work without all of those elements. It would still hit the enemy at the same rate with the same accuracy, but all those little accoutrements are so important for immersion and feedback in terms of, I'm accomplishing my goal, this is satisfying, I guess. I guess that does lead into, which I think you're getting to, is like it's almost like a glorification of weapons and guns in particular.
Gun porn, some people might say.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Video games, almost every game with guns in it falls into that to a certain extent. Like stuff like The Walking Dead treats them much more as a tool and less as, this sort of fun action movie version of it. Like I've been watching lots of YouTube videos about like guys on gun ranges and stuff like that, and like I've never been a big gun guy, but they fascinate me from like a mechanical build, like the build and the modeling of it and stuff like that, and how like efficient it is, and like they're like fascinating machines, but they're definitely Hollywoodized, I guess, in a lot of games, and that can lead to like that whole gun porn, gun fetishization sort of thing, and it's a bit weird when you step back.
Yeah,
but like, how would a game that wants to have shooting in it counter that?
Well, I mean, like if you go, really realistic with it, then it's not maybe as satisfying to use the weapons and stuff. Like I'm just trying to think of some examples. I know Arma is a huge kind of simulation more realistic shooter game where like the weapons are pretty accurate to real life weapons, even like just down to how they look and sound to some degree. Like there's probably like still a little bit of sound design going in there, but it's not to the level of like Call of Duty or something.
Or Black.
Black's a really good one.
It sounded
actually,
like a fucking drill.
Funny thing, actually, I think it was a video on Black I watched when like looking into hyperrealism and stuff, and pretty much all the guns in that game are just like they don't actually exist in real life. They're modelled off like real world weapons like an AK-47 and things
altered,
like that.
yeah.
They're altered like massively, and like I watched some guy like compare them to the real life counterparts, and he was just like laughing because he's like, there's no way like this would be possible or somebody would do this in real life kind of thing. But yeah, exactly. Black was just completely so over the top, like deafening gunshots and everything. It was crazy.
It worked for that game though. It
was amazing,
say, and
yeah.
it definitely tied into that game. It was probably very influential because after that, you couldn't have a gun that's just going. That didn't cut it anymore after Black. You needed something that was like thunderous, and the loudest thing you could hear is your gun, basically.
And just so we're not like just talking about guns as well, I just want to mention like Mortal Kombat and stuff,
of course,
with the sound design and like the X-ray cameras and all that. So there's a lot of hyperrealism in that kind of beat 'em up game and stuff as well.
You get that in the likes of Tekken even as well. Like there's like when you land a good punch in Tekken, there's like an enormous just like explosion of noise like every time you do. Like it's unreal. Like I love it. I absolutely love that. But like I remember I watched a YouTube video once where they showed like a Tekken video with the sound effects taken out, and like it's amazing how anticlimactic those fights like seem like when you take out all the sound effects. It's like, oh yeah, this is what it looks like when a real fight is happening.
Yeah, definitely. That's and it's such an sound is such a important part of it as well, because especially things where I don't know, a Tekken is a bit milder in terms of gore and stuff like that than a lot milder than a Mortal Kombat.
A lot milder. They have like no blood effects or anything in those games. They're relatively tame, but that doesn't mean they're not violent, because there is some stuff in there that's, and actually you could say in some senses it might be even worse, because well, probably not, but like the fact that they have all these like explosive like moves and like, you know, attacks on people, but they don't really show the consequences of it, that could be seen as sort of damaging, because people are thinking like, oh, it's just good fun. And like, you know, the APA back in the early noughties might be like pouncing on this thinking like, you know, little Timmy might like do a fucking jackhammer people's, I don't know any moves. Just does.
You were about to say a people's elbow.
Something like that. I don't know. Like, what's the name of the one where they like a pile driver? That was the word I was trying to think of. He just pile drived his sister, like, you know, into a wood block, and like thinking, oh, but you know, Heihachi did it, and you know, fucking Yoshimitsu was fine. So like,
Yoshimitsu was fine.
Yeah, like you could make that like it'd be a stupid argument, because we all know like just in case anyone doesn't know, like the correlation between violence in video games and, you know, I think they usually phrase it as adolescent aggression rather than just plain aggression. It's usually adolescent aggression. There isn't really like there's no real solid evidence for a correlation between those two, because it detracts from a swath of other like factors that could play into effect there. So that's why like that argument has more or less, like it's still raised every now and then. Trump brought it up for like a shooting that happened, I think it was in 2018 again. But I think despite that, it still died down, because I think most people understand that there's so many other factors in play there that you could never just attribute it entirely to violence in video games.
I do think you hit on something there. It's like we don't see the consequences from Tekken and other games like that, and like that's fine. I agree with your point, but that's like, I guess we don't really want to either. Like, I don't think every game has to be a Spec Ops, but it would. I feel like there was that period where AAA games were sort of looking at it a bit more, and then it went away. It like there hasn't been anything for like, I've been playing Disco Elysium for a while recently, and that does give you some realistic consequences to your actions, but it's not just around violence, it's around anything you do, really. And maybe in that more story-heavy sphere, it's something that gets explored with a bit more depth. But there hasn't been anything that's sort of had like even a subversive message about that, because like Spec Ops and things like that are very like to the front. It's almost like the main theme of the game.
Yeah.
But maybe I'm missing something, but it just hasn't been explored as much, I think.
No, I think sorry, Steve.
Go ahead.
I think you're right. It hasn't really been a feature in really like mainstream games. I'd argue ever. I know like Spec Ops is like that was kind of like one of the few. But even that didn't like sell as much as like Call of Duty or something like that.
Of course, it was maybe AA if we're putting that label on it, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess like, well, a good reason might be because, you know, the like developers and stuff don't want to be asking these questions because they want to sell the violence, you know.
Yeah. And maybe they think players don't want to hear these things either, because it's sort of like
I just want to kill something. Like,
a lot of people use video games to unwind, and sometimes they don't want a moral lecture, and that's fair, you know?
Yeah.
Metal Gear Solid does this a lot now, actually. And it's funny because a lot of this message usually comes out in the cutscenes, and the most popular criticism against every single Metal Gear Solid game is cut back on the cutscenes. let us just shoot people more.
That's a very valid point. I guess like to a point with like Metal Gear Solid 4 is absolutely taking the piss with like the amount of cutscenes in it. But you're completely right. Like that is Kojima's like space to explore those themes, and it is a really central point. Probably that gets missed by a lot of people, is how anti-war the Metal Gear Solid games are. But you're completely right. That was like gamers didn't want to hear it a lot of the time. They just want to get me to the cool part where I shoot things.
Yeah. One game I wanted to bring up as well, actually, which I think, you know, managed to take the gun mechanic and not use it for violence, but still have it be really satisfying, was Portal.
Oh, yeah.
The fact that, like, you shoot a portal and, you know, it pops up on screen with a satisfying sound and all that. So you were still getting that instant feedback and that satisfaction, but you weren't destroying anything, but it was giving you, like... Well, it was helping you move forward in the game
and solving things. Yeah,
the same way I suppose killing somebody would in a game. But I just think that's like amazing how they did that, to use that mechanic for something non-violent. It was really good.
That's completely true. And the more you think about Portal, the more you think, wow, that was like lightning in a bottle. They completely nailed that, because they did. It feels good to move around those levels because of our like the ingrained muscle memory we have from first-person games. But the fact that they recontextualize it and use it for something that's non-destructive even, and marred with like some really intelligent puzzle design, like it's one of the best, really.
Yeah, and a lot of other puzzle games have kind of used that mechanic to a gun mechanic to some degree since then as well.
There's a lot of games that I do think that are basically shooter games that have just been reskinned so that you wouldn't actually know they are. I was thinking, just when you guys mentioned early on for like the really early games, how shooting was like a key mechanic in so many early video games. Do you remember the game Tapper by any chance?
No.
Tapper, I'd say you've probably seen an alternative Flash version online somewhere. It's a very popular game. It's the one where you play as a bartender.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you'll see like, so you have 4 countertops and like drunks are slowly approaching you from the other side of the counters, and you basically have to shoot beers along the countertop. So like every time a drunk gets a beer, he starts backing off again, but more drunks are always coming.
That's mad.
And like that in itself is like pretty interesting, because you essentially have a very, very basic shooter that has been reskinned for something that's pretty harmless, you know? So, and like, I think Nintendo are particularly good at this.
Oh, yeah.
So, 2 examples I'm going to bring up. The first one you know, I'd say the other one you don't. The first one is Splatoon. So, Splatoon is very, very obviously Nintendo going, okay, everybody loves shooters. How do we get in on this? And
without actually killing people.
Exactly. Let's keep it family friendly, which is weird that they're concerned with that. This is the same company that like published Mad World on the Wii, Do you guys remember Mad World?
The black and white one where like everything was black and white, but the blood was red in it.
Yeah, that's it. The whole thing it's a bit like Manhunt too, that the whole idea is like it's a game and you have to just kill people in as violent a way as possible. So it's weird that they had that there.
Was that a Nintendo like first IP, was it? First party IP?
Not an IP. No, I think Sega developed it actually, but it was exclusively on the Wii. So
wow.
Yeah, but Splatoon is another one where they're doing like a similar thing. Like they've got a battle royale shooter, but rather than like kill your enemies, you just have to like get the most paint all over the thing. It's an ingenious idea, and like particularly in Japan, I can't speak for the rest of the world, but here it's really popular. Like I know a lot of the like school kids here really, really love Splatoon. They're always asking me if I play it, so it's a good like a pretty good game.
Yeah,
the other one.
Oh, sorry,
you go ahead. I'll talk about the other one afterwards.
No, I was just going to quickly say I know that was one of the top selling Switch games like worldwide. I'm pretty sure for the longest time. But yeah.
And then I think Nintendo as a company stands as an example that you can, well, like we say, they're not violent games, but like, they still have certain elements where you're destroying enemies, but it's very mild compared to the rest of the AAA sphere anyway. What's the other game, Steve?
The other game you might have seen on the Switch stores is an upcoming one. It hasn't been released yet. It's called Say No More.
Say No More.
So the premise for this is that you're a person in an office environment and one day you just crack. So you get up from your desk and you just start leaving and you start shooting the word no from your mouth every time someone asks you to do something. And every time like the no physically comes out of your mouth, it hits someone and sends them reeling. So you get people saying like, hey, could you do overtime on Saturday? And she's like, no. And they get like blasted away. And like someone else, can you make me a copy of this? Like, no. And it blasts them away. And what I think is incredibly funny about this is that like I think this might be on the back of some people's minds, but essentially what this is like somebody just having a mental breakdown, and it would be so easy to have someone taking a gun out from their desk and basically being hatred too, just killing everybody in their office. But instead it's a completely harmless and really hilarious looking game that I really, really want to play.
I'm just looking at a trailer of it and it's cool.
Too.
You have different language options. So like in German, they'll say nine. But one of them is Irish Gaelic. So it's nice
no way.
bit of representation. Thanks, Nintendo.
Oh,
Neil.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Sick. That's really cool.
But like it does show that there's space for that within games. And like you were saying, Splatoon is a very successful game. It's not like it's all these little indie games that are, recontextualizing this thing and trying to, like, the great thing about Splatoon and Portal is that they take the mechanics and the controls that we've learned through all these shooting games and just uses them from something else. And it just shows how, a lot of the shooting games are pretty like copy and paste a lot of the time, like you're doing the same thing, and there's like, outside of even the violence questions, there's not a lot of inventiveness in terms of mechanics a lot of the time. It's just new areas to do things.
Yeah. I think I just want to go back quickly on something you touched on about like Nintendo games, the ones that have violence in it, or or killing or whatever.
Destroying an enemy.
Destroying an enemy, yeah. Like the thing is, they use them more as like, this is just a mechanic in the game. This is one way to, like, I'm thinking of something like Legend of Zelda or Mario, like, there are enemies, you might need to attack them, but it's not the main focus of the game. It's not the main thing in the game is to kill these enemies or whatever. Whereas like, or more so, the game has a lot more that it brings rather than just
so
that.
It's not like there's a single goal. There's many different, because like I guess in Zelda you're solving puzzles and you're platforming to a certain degree as well.
Yeah, totally. But then something like always going to go back to, well, no, like something like first-person shooters in general, like say in the Nintendo games, the combat is, like you said, a lot more tame, and it's not very like
graphic.
It's not very graphic. It's not very like built up with like really satisfying sounds and all that stuff. Where, well,
I don't know. I'd argue that they are like the sound design, and like I don't think a game exists that has better sound design than Mario games. To be honest, it's maybe for a different goal, but it's still in a different lane. But it's not as extreme.
Okay, yeah,
as something else.
I think that's what I'm getting at. More like when you look at first person or third person shooters, you know, the amount of hyper realism that's gone into the sound design and the combat effects and stuff like that. It's because that's the main thing in the game. It's a shooter. This is what you do. You don't do anything else. You shoot and you move to the point A, point B. You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But anyway, yeah. Sorry, just
that can be amazing. Like Max Payne, the first Max Payne is just so satisfying.
Oh, I'm so glad you brought that up.
It's just really like. And the atmosphere in that game, I don't know how they did it, but like even outside the cutscenes, if they had no cutscenes in that game, I'd still love the atmosphere in it.
Yeah.
Just like these guys in like, they're all like middle-aged guys you shoot in like leather jackets, you know? Yeah. It's sort of like, they're all like scruffy and rough and you're in dingy alleyways and the shooting feels amazing in a Max Payne game. And like, I don't think we're saying we want to get rid of that.
No,
I think we love that. And when it's done well, it can be one of the purest forms of this art form.
Totally.
But there's so much of it. It's sort of like the question around the representation of women in video games. I think it's completely okay for there to be like a bikini sniper in a game. That's fine. But when every sniper in every game is a bikini sniper, then it's a problem.
Yeah, like we're not saying that, you know, how do we get rid of this or whatever? Because like some of one of my favorite genres is shooter games. Like, you know, I love like the, you know, like guns and all that kind of thing. But it's more. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we've kind of steered away from it a bit, but yeah, I think we're just trying to get to the bottom of why do we as players enjoy it so much? And it's constantly the thing that sells. And will there ever be a change in that where, like, I know sports games and stuff are very popular as well. Like FIFA is one of the best selling games year on year as well. But do you know that the big game of the year is always a Grand Theft Auto or a Call of Duty or something like that?
Yeah.
And I'm wondering, will we ever see a shift away from violence, like being the main, the big seller? I don't think we will, honestly. But you know, it's hard to know what will come up down the line, especially with VR and stuff. You know, there'll be a lot of like really cool things that you can do in that won't be violent things. You know. So yeah, I don't know.
So Sean, you were saying, will violent video games be popular forever? And I do think they will be to a certain extent, but I do think it's interesting that we're seeing, like, sort of like what we were talking about with Portal and Splatoon, that they're getting like sort of changed to a certain extent and recontextualized. You have stuff like, you know, Overwatch and Fortnite, where they're still using these mechanics. You're still shooting enemies, you're still destroying them, you're using a lot of the same controls and sort of movement controls, etc. But they're presented in like a lot more of a cartoony, lighthearted way. Like there isn't that hyper-realism like you were talking about before.
Yeah.
And I think that's sort of a strand that's happening that's sort of different than more violent stuff like the military shooters or Black or anything like that.
Yeah, well, I think that's also an answer to like those military shooters just becoming like the market becoming oversaturated with that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So they've just kind of like developers have moved on to something new, something like cartoony and stuff, you know. But I think there will be like a coexistence of these two genres of shooters for quite a while, because I know personally, like I would still prefer like the military stuff. I wouldn't really like, I'm not really too into like Overwatch or Fortnite or anything.
I've heard a lot of people saying that they specifically don't like these types of games because they are cartoony, or I see the term thrown around like kids games a lot of the time, whereas mechanically they're as complex as a lot of other games, but just people prefer the setting, and that's important, you know. Setting and immersion's important.
Context is a very important like thing there, and like I think it's kind of hard to take something like Fortnite or Overwatch seriously, because it kind of to me it gives off the same vibe as the likes of Mario Kart, in that, you know, the way, you know, Mario is racing around with Bowser and Wario, whereas like in the other games they're trying to kill each other, like, so clearly this is like their holiday time where they're just kind of chilling, and it's like, so it like takes all the tension out of those games. And I think these, like the likes of Fortnite and Overwatch, are kind of operating on the same sort of rules, in that this is all just a game. Like they're very much holding, like wearing that on their sleeve. Like, we're just playing a game. It's all fun. Like, no one's getting hurt here. So context, I think, is important, because when you take that away, that is going to detract for some players.
Yeah.
Definitely there's a strand of player, or like certain types of people, and I understand you want some tension, and that oftentimes that tension comes from reflecting real life things. So the hyperrealism and the grounded aspect of things, and it's weird. Warzone, the Call of Duty Battle Royale game, sort of like skirts the line, because it's definitely in the sphere of military shooter, etc. But it's so over the top. It's like, it's the Fast and the Furious sort of version of real life in a way.
Yeah,
like you're doing crazy things, and like your crazy arsenal, and jumping around in cars and stuff like that.
It's like the setting, and I suppose the weapons and all that are kind of realistic, but it's just like what you're actually doing in the game is like, this would never happen.
Yeah, true. And I guess it doesn't feel too brutal in terms of violence in a way. Like, it's almost, you brought up when we're off mic, Sean, that like, for as intense an experience as Black is, because of the sound design and environmental destruction, there's not actually any blood or gore in that game.
Yeah, very true.
Which is very interesting, because like, me and Steve were surprised in that, because my memory of playing that game was, it was like brutal. It was like, when you shot somebody, you felt it.
The feedback in the game for shooting someone was like, I think, actually, I could be wrong about this, but I think your controller actually vibrated when the shot landed on the enemy as well. And it just kind of showed like a little white spark or something when each shot landed. And that was it. There was no blood or anything, as like other games would give you for feedback. And actually, I think I'm probably Modern War, or in Warzone, is there blood in Warzone?
I have a feeling,
or it's very toned down, or
it's
something.
pretty toned down. Like, I have a feeling there is blood. Now, I could be wrong about this as well, but it's interesting that neither of us can tell offhand if there is. Where like, we know 100% that there's like blood and doom. Yeah, but like, you have to have blood and doom.
What about the game Blood? Would you say there's blood in Blood?
There's definitely a lot of dynamite in Blood. I know that.
and to come to think of it, like Battlefield as well. I don't know if I can't remember.
Battlefield's a weird one. Especially the newer ones are very, very realistic in some ways, but also have this weird bombastic streak through them. Tone is a very weird thing in Battlefield games, I find.
It is worth noting, though, that we're talking about violence here, and I think there is a danger of associating violence primarily with blood and like gore and that sort of thing, but just like actions can be like by themselves can be. I know that sounds like I'm just talking, like really dumbing it down, but it is worth remembering, because some people think that, there's no blood in it, then it's fine, which is not true. Like, the fact that you're shooting constantly in these games, even if there is no blood, doesn't stop them from being exceptionally violent games. But going in the opposite direction, like we've talked about like all these shooters and all, but like just talking about games with lots of blood and viscera and gore. So I'm kind of leaning into more of a horror kind of area here, where like you have like, games where like, people are mutilated and stuff like that. Look, here's an example, actually, the likes of the Tomb Raider games, where Lara is constantly killed in these incredibly brutal ways. And those were really successful.
And they aren't the ones that first come to mind when you think of like a violent game. Like Tomb Raider isn't the one that like instantly comes to mind.
But it's there.
Yeah. It's a weird strand of a lot of games. It's weird because, like you say, Laura gets killed in all these brutal ways, and she does, but there's a weird part of our brains that are like, that was the game over screen. That's not canon within the game universe.
That's not the game. Like, it's just, but some games are defined by that, though. Like the likes of Manhunt 2. And I remember I never played it, but I saw my friend playing it before. The Punisher game, where like a big part of it was like torturing people in really inventive ways. Like I'm surprised that didn't get more. Maybe I'm remembering wrong. I just don't remember it getting much coverage. Do you guys remember if it did?
Manhunt 2 definitely did get a lot of coverage.
Yeah.
It got banned in a lot of places, but the Punisher game doesn't ring a bell for me, to be honest.
I played a bit of it actually, and it is really violent.
It is a Punisher game, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can kill like enemies with the environment around you and stuff. Like stick their head in a fan and like all this crazy stuff. Yeah.
The weird thing is, me and Steve were playing A Way Out recently, and there's a torture section in that. Where
oh god, that was like a cartoon though.
It was so weird though, because the tone that was probably the biggest tonal shift in that game, because like it's sort of like a bit of a romp, that game. Like it takes itself seriously, but like it's a little silly. And then you have to torture this guy, and you're using like blow torches and nail guns.
That's mad.
And stuff on him. It reminded me of there's an infamous part in the single player campaign of Grand Theft Auto 5 where you torture I can't remember, I think it might be a guy from Iraq for information, and it's the player has to do it, and it's player controlled. It's not like a cutscene, and it's pretty brutal and pretty graphic, and it leaves a really bad taste in your mouth, to be honest. Like they're at the end, they sort of hand wave it away because you release the guy and you help him escape. But it's properly brutal. It's not played. I don't know what tone they were going for with that, but like it was really extreme in that game.
I find violence of this nature is very different to the likes of gun violence. I feel like I don't think it's quite as popular in the same way that shooters are. I'm not sure like how they feed into like gamer perceptions. I find myself thinking of Heavy Rain. Have you guys played Heavy Rain?
Yeah.
Do you remember the section where you have to cut off one of your fingers?
Yeah, that's mad. That's really, really brutal, and the way it's done, and you don't have a choice. Well, you don't have a choice if you want to progress the story, pretty much.
Yeah, and it's brutal, not so much for the depiction, because if I remember right, I don't think you actually see the finger being chopped off, but the fact that you have to do all the button prompts to get yourself to cut the finger off, so it just makes me cringe even just thinking of it now. It's a very interesting form of violence that's all suggested rather than actually portrayed.
Yeah, I just say off the back of that, and like you were talking about like the torture in games and stuff, like I don't like. I'd say it's a very like a minority of people, but I think the majority of people don't enjoy that stuff. Like it's meant to be almost like horror, like where it's like, oh my god, I have to do this, or like you like it's horrifying to do the stuff or to have it done to you or whatever. So it's like you said, it's not the same as like gun violence and stuff, whereas like you enjoy shooting a gun in a game and you enjoy like killing enemies and stuff like that. It's a bit different to that stuff.
It's way more intimate as well, which makes it more distressing to do, because the nature of a torture is usually to get information from someone. So the player character is actively talking to that person. You're never talking to someone you're shooting in a game, unless you're fucking Duke Nukem and you're just saying like, groovy.
Sean, you played Resident Evil 7 recently. I distinctly remember a really visceral bit of torture happening in that.
Yeah, I was just I was thinking of bringing that game up just because of well, what scene are you talking about in specifically?
It's the bit with his hand.
Oh, okay. So yeah, that's like really near the beginning of the game. Yeah, when at the dinner table, is that what you're talking about?
I just know it gets sliced in a certain way. I don't know too many details. I don't mind you spoiling it for me, because I more or less know what happens. So
no worries. I mean, it's actually really early in the game, but there's another thing with the hands actually that I'll go into as well. But so that was really like a shock for me. I think it's when I don't know if it's Well, yeah, you basically your hand gets chopped off anyway, like right in front of you, and it's really like holy shit, like I didn't expect that to happen. And then you basically, I can't remember exactly when that happens, but you wake up then and you're at a dinner table, and the hand is like sewn. Oh no, sorry, yeah, you actually you have to grab your hand and stick it back on yourself, and then like that's the funny thing. You stick it back on, and then you like apply some like a first aid kit, and it's fine. Yeah. But you can see it's like stapled to you. But then you wake up, and yeah, you're at this dinner table with the Baker family, and they're all eating like rotten stuff, and it's really like horrible. And then I think the son of the family like gets like ants, or like he starts like shouting about something or whatever, and the father gets really angry and just goes over and chops his arm off with a machete right in front of you, and it's like holy shit, what is going on? But one cool thing I wanted to talk about in that was which is a torture thing actually as well. In the DLC, in one of the DLCs for that, this isn't really too much of a spoiler because it's just a mini game. You're basically, you play as somebody else, just another like prisoner of the Baker family, and you're in like in the house somewhere, and you have to play a game of blackjack against another prisoner, and whoever wins the game gets let go, gets free. But the thing is, both of your hands are attached to a machine, and if you basically lose a hand of blackjack, it chops one of your fingers off.
Oh my god!
And it does it in a really violent way, like horrible. Like it makes you watch it as well, where it like pulls the finger back almost all the way, and then like chops it off or something. It's horrible, man. And so I won like all my games. Oh no, I think I won like all 5 games. The thing is, it's really horrible because the guy you're playing against is just another prisoner, and he keeps saying to you, like through every hand, it's like, oh, I've got like a wife and kids at home, like I really want to see him again, and all this kind of stuff. And you're just like an empty character. You don't know like anything about your character. And he's like, please, man, I really want to get home and stuff. And with each hand you win, it's chopping off one of his hands until the end when he has no fingers left on one hand. It's horrible. And then basically like the game gets changed up after that, and they attach like this electric shock thing to your body, and so after every round you get electrocuted, and that's not as gory than the fingers being chopped off. But yeah, that was horrible and really like not nice to play. But because you were basically inflicting the torture on the other guy, but if it's not him, it's me. You were getting your fingers chopped off. So yeah. Anyway,
to sum it up, Resident Evil 7 is slightly violent.
Just slightly, yeah. But it's really cool.
I read an article recently about. I found this really interesting. Why people watch films that are marketed as being particularly violent, gruesome, or gory. And there was a study done on this, and they were asking questions like, why are you intrigued to watch this movie that's been, marketed as like a really violent, gory film? And what they found was quite an awful lot of people felt that if a film was being depicted as very violent or gory, they seemed to think that there would be more to the film because of that. That there was like some kind of message behind the gore, and they were trying to like, decipher what that was. It wasn't necessarily the draw of the gore itself. They were like, there's a meaning behind this, and what is the meaning? Some people phrase it slightly differently. They said that they found themselves, if a film was particularly gory, it was a chance to delve into like a person's psyche and mind, like, or even that of a serial killer. And I found that really interesting because of like the recent trend of like, serial killer documentaries like on Netflix, which are just like exploding in popularity. And I don't think like anybody goes into those necessarily for like the gore factor. It's all like, why
it's the
is
mystery,
this happening? Yeah. And I wonder if that kind of feeds into, really, really violent games. Like maybe there is like a possibility that people are going into these to ask the question, like, why is this happening? Not necessarily of the characters in the game, but like, why are we sitting here in front of a game that is like incredibly gory? Why did the person feel the need to make this? And why are we sitting here, consuming it? Do you know what I mean?
I do think that stands for some games, and maybe like possibly the more brutal examples, like something like Manhunt. I feel like the gore and violence is intrinsically linked with its mood and themes. But like on the other hand, I feel like violence and gore and blood in games is just so widespread. It's almost like an industry standard in some ways. Like there's no more thought put into it than that in certain cases. Like if a game developer is making a third-person shooter, they don't even question the fact that you're going to see people die. They're like, that's just going to happen. Like there's no more thought put into it than that. Maybe in a way, if you take like the death of the author thing, there is some meaning to be taken from that violence, but I'm not sure there's any like specific subversive theme or anything like that.
I think it only really applies, not necessarily to, the standard violent video game that we've been talking about for the most part, but, the games that have, these particularly violent standout scenes. The one that comes to mind for me is in God of War 3, when you pull the guy's head off. Like that is such a gory scene and it didn't need to be there. That's a game, that's a section in the game that could have very easily been, and Kratos pulled him by the hair and chopped his head off with his blade, but instead they chose to have him pull it off. And it raises the question, like I found when I was watching it, I was like, wow, why did they put that there? Why is that there? I feel like when you have like games that are excessively gory, I do sometimes think, like I know I do, but I think sometimes people do find themselves thinking, why? Why is this here? That's why we're having this podcast after all.
Exactly, yeah. No answers here though, guys.
Zero.
I see what you mean as well. The cynical part of me feels like it's an arms race between developers sometimes, especially in the 90s with like the Mortal Kombat stuff.
Yeah, totally.
I sort of feel like they just want to get more over the top, more shocking. We want people talking about this scene. But other times it can definitely tie into, like, sometimes it can just be into the mood or atmosphere of a game. Sometimes the developer might want to shock you and like take you out of your comfort zone to a certain extent. But like a lot of the times I feel like it's a little bit of one-upmanship.
Yeah, it's an interesting topic to discuss anyway, and I don't think there's any conclusion to it really, because there's a lot of different reasons and a lot of different types of violence that people enjoy for one reason or another. So yeah, I think unless anybody else has any closing statements they'd like to make on that, I think we've touched on a lot of good points through that, talked about a lot of different games. So yeah, I think all that's left to do is to, as we always do each week. Oh, sorry, Stephen has something to say.
He's going to shit on the evil way again.
Yeah. Sorry,
just
go ahead,
know
Steve.
what. In the research, and there was no natural way to bring this up in conversation, but I did find one first-person shooter called Super 3D Noah's Ark, where you play as Noah shooting food into the mouths of the animals that you have taken up onto your ark. So,
oh man, that is leave it to Steve anyway to fucking bring the most obscure game to the podcast.
Oh my god, this reminds me of, there was a first-person shooter. This was only in America, but it was like in Chex Mix or something like that came free with the cereal, and you go around, like, I think you do go around killing enemies and that, but they're like, you kill them with like a spoon and things like that,
What was what you sent me a link to one once where it was like a taco game or a burrito game or something? Do you remember this?
Jeez, I don't. I might have been inebriated myself when I sent that. I don't remember. Taco.
Everyone look up burrito first-person shooter and see what you come up with.
That's everyone at home as well. You can play
along. Yeah, cool. So thanks for that discussion, guys. I think it was very informative. Now we'll move on to our weekly, or not weekly, but our tradition,
annual,
our tradition on the podcast of seeing what everyone's been playing. So I'm going to actually put it to Michael first this time, because he's always left to last.
Yeah,
Michael, what are you playing at the moment?
Thanks for going first with me, because it's a bit of a boring answer, because I'm playing the last thing I played was the same thing I was playing the last time we were talking about this, Disco Elysium. I just finished it and it's amazing. It's Possibly the best game I've played this year so far. It's going to be a strong contender for my favorite game that I've played this year, I think.
What about the game we played though, Michael?
Me and Steve played A Way Out, which was a lot of fun, I have to say. I don't think it would have been fun if it was just me playing by myself. I'm not sure you even can do that, but it was dumb fun and I enjoyed it, I have to say.
I think the writing in that was pointedly bad. Very bad. I think that I do think that was genuinely think that was a deliberate choice because we the amount of times we were like, oh, hang on, what did he say? Because we were just chatting over it the whole time.
Or the amount of times we predicted what would happen in the next scene because it was just so like boilerplate. But mechanically, it did some very interesting things with the co-op and stuff that I quite enjoyed. But anyway, Disco Elysium is amazing. I think you both should play it at some point. I think Steve will definitely love it to a certain extent. I'm not sure about Sean, but it would be interesting to see your take on a game like this that's so far removed from what you would usually play.
Yeah, I might get it. I think it's on the Switch. I think
Final Cut might have come out for the Switch.
I'm not sure. Might have. I might. Well, if it is, I might get it, and it might be like a nice game to play. How long? Actually, yeah. How long is it? That's the thing.
I can't remember how long.
I remember you were playing it for ages.
I can't remember how long because it didn't give me any stats at the end, so I'm not sure. But I'd say a good 20 to 30 hours, possibly. Wow. Maybe I'm fluffing that a bit. Around 20, I'd say. But it's maybe one of those games where you can play for as long as you want. There's plenty of side stuff that you don't necessarily have to do.
Right.
But I really wanted to do everything in this game. It's a lot of fun. The writing is amazing. That's the main selling point. The art style is fantastic as well, but it's the writing, because that's the main mechanic in the game is responding and conversation wheels and dice rolls and stuff like that. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. It does so many inventive things with its setting and the depth that the depth of the writing and the lore in this, because it's set in like an alternate world, I guess, an alternate version of our world, I should say. And the amount of thought gets put into like so many details of the history of the world and the politics of the world is amazing. And it's a really funny game as well. It's fun. It's not like, God, I have to read this fucking book, written by some 19th century fucking dude who lived on a chair. I don't know what I mean by that. It made sense before I said it. But anyway, really recommend that game. And A Way Out is fun too. It has a guy with a big nose.
It does.
So, Steve, what are you playing at the moment?
Thanks for asking, Michael. So at the moment, I'm playing the Phoenix Wright trilogy on the Switch.
Cool.
I don't know if you guys have played that before. It's a game I tried to play like back on the DS, and I didn't really get into it now or back then. But it's a weird game in that the highs are very high, but the lows are very low. Like when you're doing a case and like you know exactly what you need to say, and you're just like picking apart someone's argument, it's really, really satisfying. But it's got this really annoying habit of being a video game that I hate. Like, like it has this need to try and have like a lose state, and lose states are just so frustrating in this game. So basically, the lose state in this is if you try to take apart an argument using evidence that isn't relevant to the case or something like that, the judge basically says, I think you need to rethink your argument, and he gets a little bit more annoyed. And if you keep annoying the judge, he basically says, you're stupid, Phoenix, right? So she's guilty. The end. And it's frustrating because all it does is send you back to the start of the trial, and you have to do everything the exact same way you did before, and just wait till you get to the point that you were at before, and then try different things. It's frustrating. I wish they just took a visual novel approach to it, because the strengths are the characters. The characters in this are so good and so funny and really, really distinctive. Like, so I really, really enjoy it, but I just wish it would acknowledge the fact that it's not really a game.
Yeah, it's really such a weird thing to have to put in a lose state a lot of the time. And maybe someone would argue, we want that challenge or you want that tension or something. But I think a lot of games benefit from not having that unless it's an intrinsic part of the gameplay loop, I guess.
Like I found myself occasionally, like if I've lost a trial twice in a row, I'll just go to a walkthrough because I'm like, I don't really feel like I'm missing out on anything here, so I might as well. Like I will try always to try and solve the case like my own way first, but after a while it just gets annoying. It doesn't really make me want to watch the Japanese movie adaptation though, because I've heard that's good and it looks as ridiculous as the game.
Is that like a real life thing or a anime, or is it like
it's live action?
Live action, yeah. Wow.
It's done by your man Takeshi Mike, I think.
Oh, no way.
I think he directed it. I'm gonna just look that up now, see if it's true.
That dude has had such a career. What a crazy genius he is.
Yeah, I know, right? Takeshi Mike. It was him that did it. So, definitely want to watch that.
Wow.
So yeah, that's why I was playing. I'm about halfway through it now. Halfway through the second game in the trilogy. So about halfway through. So the big question, the one we're all waiting to hear now,
the juicy one.
Sean, how is The Evil Within 2 and how far are you into it?
Man, I didn't think The Evil Within 1 could be trumped, but bloody hell. No, unfortunately, I still don't have a means to play that game, but that will definitely be coming up in a future. Is Sean playing? No,
that's not the name of the podcast, Sean.
It's not. It was an outrage. Anyway,
you definitely sounded outraged there, Sean. You're such a good actor.
I guess. So I can't even remember if I said I was playing this, like Steve mentioned it earlier, that Resident Evil 7. I don't know if I said that on the last one we did.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
But no, that's fine. Well, I just finished it about a week or a couple of weeks ago, and I wanted to play it since it came out. Basically, I just got it and absolutely love it. It's one of the best. Now, I haven't played 8 yet, obviously. That will come in due course, but 7 was kind of the almost reboot of the series anyway, because 6 did so badly and stuff. But it's definitely one of the best Resident Evils I've played in a long time. I'm not going to say where it is on my ranking of Resident Evil games because that's subjective anyway for everyone listening, and I don't really know yet either because it's very different to all the other Resident Evil
ones. Yeah.
It's first person for starters, which not the first person Resident Evil game though. If anyone remembers Dead Aim, but nobody remembers that game. But it's I don't know what to say about it. It's just brilliant. The setting, the atmosphere, the combat, the resource management, everything about it is just really, really good. It's a really good survival horror game. And it the resource management in it is kind of in classic Resident Evil style, where you open up your menu and you have a bag or a briefcase kind of thing. And it's done really well. It really gives you kind of feck all slots at the start, but then you can upgrade that as you go and things. And it's not too shootery either. That's one of the interesting things about it. It's not it's they really try to go away from that. You obviously have guns in it and you do need to shoot enemies, but it's not a massive part of the game. The puzzle solving and stuff is there still. It's a very good balance, I think, between combat and just searching around and puzzle solving and things like that. There will be large parts of the game where you'll just be going around searching for items or something, and there won't be any combat, which for me was really tense because I couldn't predict when the next piece of combat or whatever was going to happen. But yeah. It was, really, really enjoyed it. It was a brilliant game. I'm playing some of the DLC at the moment, and I'll definitely be playing Village soon as well.
Man, I remember when the trailer for that game dropped, and I got so excited because I thought like I think that was after PT got cancelled, and I thought, oh my god, they've brought it back, yes. And then I had this weird mixed reaction when I found out it was Resident Evil. I was like,
I was there. He made that exact sound. Yeah,
it really was like, oh, cool.
Yeah, it's funny though you bring up PT because it really has. I felt like it almost took what PT did and was like, let's make a full game out of this. Do you know? Because especially when you're in the house and you're walking the corridors and stuff like that, it completely has that vibe. I wouldn't say it's now I actually didn't play PT, but I did watch some playthroughs and stuff. I wouldn't say it's like the atmosphere is as thick maybe as PT is, if you get me.
Not many games have as thick an atmosphere though, in fairness.
Yeah.
PT.
Well, I think the beauty of PT though is it was like this one corridor and they could stick so many things in that one corridor. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. Whereas like you do get kind of like little. I will say one thing: the sound design in 7 is unbelievable. Like, especially like I remember at the beginning when you're going through this like old farmhouse and stuff, and there's just the sounds that they throw like to like creaks and stuff like that, where it sounds like somebody's moving behind you and stuff, and there's nobody there. That stuff like was really freaky. So yeah, they did an amazing job on it, and yeah, can't wait to play Village.
Awesome, cool. Well, I think we all can't wait for you to play Village, Sean. And I think that
castle titties.
Yeah, that big tall lady. So that about wraps us up.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Thanks for listening, guys, and thanks for talking about violence for the guts of an hour or more.
Yeah, and if you want to leave in the comments below your favourite violent video game,
your favourite headshot in a game,
or why you enjoy violence, that'd be great. And like and subscribe and blah blah blah. Yeah.
Should we finish off by shooting our guns into the air, or how should we do this?
Pew, pew, pew. I tell you,
Sean, you are on fire
anyways.
today. I'm starving.
Sean's catchphrase.
Yeah, I'm definitely getting some lunch. And yeah, thanks everyone, and sure we'll be back in another unspecified amount of time.
That's a perfect
weekly podcast.
Tune in next week for nothing. All right. See you everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Good luck.